Hi, my name is Chris Bailey. I'm a Blender YouTuber over at C Bailey Film. Today I'm bringing you this tutorial with CG Cookie. We're going to be talking about the difference between perspective and orthographic cameras, and we're going to be making this little LowPoly Forest scene to do it. Let's get started. If you enjoy this tutorial and want to dive into making a much more detailed forest, go check out Ken Trammell's course on cgcookie.com called Creating a Stylized Forest with Blender. Okay, so let's start making this little low-poly forest first, and then we'll talk about the difference between perspective and orthographic. So kind of two-part idea in this tutorial. So let's just start off with this low-poly forest. So I've got my default cube set up here, and I'm gonna go ahead and hit S to scale and Z to lock it on the Z. And then S again to scale this thing up, and just gonna use this to create a bit of a base. Now, next thing I wanna do is create some trees that I can scatter across this. So I'm going to actually make them off to the side, I think, and then we can duplicate them and kind of paint them around. All right, so next let's make a tree. We're gonna make a low poly tree. So I'm gonna go Shift A, and let's create a cylinder. And under here, I'll move my face so you can see it. We've got the little drop down menu. I'm gonna pop this up. And I'm just going to turn down my vertices. I'll go with 5. I think that should look pretty good. So I'll grab Z and scale Z and just scale that up a little bit. So we've got this nice polygon trunk. And next, let's go ahead and create a couple of the different tree portions. So I think what I'm going to do that is I'm going to Shift D to duplicate. I'm going to grab Z. I'm going to scale it up and scale Z just like this. And then I'm going to go into edit mode and I will select this face. And I'm going to scale this to 0. So hit S and then 0, just like that. And that'll create a nice point where it all comes together. I'll also hit A to select all. I'll go to the vertexes because we have a whole lot of vertexes kind of piled up right here. And it's a good idea to get rid of that kind of stuff. So I'm going to F3 and I'm going to type merge. And we're going to merge by distance. And we'll see down here, we've got 4 vertices have been removed. So that is all good to go. So I'm going to scale that up a bit and bring it down. So I'm going to take this now and I'm going to Shift D to duplicate, grab Z, bring it up, maybe rotate it a little bit. Shift D, grab Z, bring it up, rotate it, and maybe scale down a touch as well. I'll take this one, scale it down a little bit too. Now let's go ahead and put some base materials on this so then we can join this mesh up and then make a bunch of them. So we'll take these guys and I'm going to come over to the Material tab and I'll click New and I'll call this green. I'm just going to do some basic flat materials. And I will assign green to these different portions. And then I'll create a new material, call this brown for the trunk. And we can go ahead and color these as well. No reason why we shouldn't. So I'll just kind of give this a bit of a brown color and I'll grab green and give this a nice green color. Something like this. We can switch over to material preview so we can see it. And then what I'll do is I'll select these guys and I will hit Control J and that will join them up. So now this is one piece of mesh. Really nice. Oops, I got the basics. Well, so I'm just going to select these guys for the tree and I'm going to hit Control J and that will join the mesh up. So now it's all one mesh and I can scale this down a bit and scale it up and grab this here. All right, cool. So I'm going to call this my tree. Okay, so I want to create a bit of landscape, so some rolling hills and stuff. So I'm going to take our base and I'll leave the base as is. I'll grab the face mode, select this top face, and I'll hit Shift D to duplicate. Then what I'll do is hit P to bring up my separate menu, and I'll separate by selection. I'll leave edit mode by hitting tab, and this gives me a new cube, and it's just this flat plane. So it's a duplicate. It's basically just the same size as this base. I just wanted to have something with the same size. Now I'm going to go here. I'm going to select all in edit mode of this new plot plane that we have. I'll hit F3 and type subdivide. And again, I'll open the drop-down menu and I will just increase my subdivisions up to maybe, I don't know, let's go 30. That's probably going to be good. Now what I can do is leave edit mode and I'm going to come over here. I could do this 2 ways. I could sculpt it by hand or I could come over here, add a modifier and grab a displacement modifier and then click new to create a new texture and then come down to the texture tab and we're going to switch this from image or movie to clouds. And I will leave edit mode so we can begin to see it. And I'll come over here. I might make the size a lot bigger and come back up here and we can increase the strength. And that's going to start giving us some landscape you can see here. So I can grab this up. a little bit like that. And now I'm going to jump back to my texture tab and I'm going to increase my scale even more. Now I'm also going to change this to give it more of a polygonal kind of, low poly, but I said poly a lot there, didn't I? Okay, so I'm going to go to the Blender original for the noise bias and I'm going to switch this to cell noise. Cell noise gives us these nice blocks and looks really cool. So I can play with this depth again just to get something that looks good. And I'm just going to grab it up so that it's above my base plane here. Now, what I can do next is come back up to my modifiers tab, and I can actually just apply this displacement modifier. So click apply. Now I can go into edit mode, and I can hold down Alt and go to edge mode, hold down Alt and select the outer edge. And that'll actually select the edge for this whole side. And I can do that for here by holding down Alt and Shift, and here, and here. So now I've got all the sides all around. Now I can hit E to extrude, G to grab, and Z, and I'll just bring it straight down like this. And then I can hit S to scale and Z to lock it on the Z, and then hit 0 to flatten it out. So now I've got this nice flat surface, and I can just stop that there. So this way I can have like one level that's going to be like sort of that subterranean dirt, and then we can have the next level here. So I'll create this material. I'll call this material dirt, and I'll give it some kind of dirt color. And then I'll grab this one, and we'll call this, I'll get rid of dirt from this, and we'll call this ground. And I might give it like a green color for the grass, maybe. And for this bit too, let's get this whole side section. So I'm going to grab face mode, hold down Alt, and select this. This will select the entire edge loop. So all those continuous faces, it flows all the way around, grabs all of them when you hold down Alt. And bear in mind too, I'm clicking on the side edge, right? Because the loop cut follows the edges that you pick. So if you select the side edge, it'll look for, okay, what are all the different side edges? How many are connected and how long does it go? If I was to click on the other edge, the top down edge, you can see it's going to do the same thing, but select the loop the other way. So that's kind of how edge loops work. I'm going to click plus to create a new material slot and new for a new material and assign. That will assign a new material just to this outer bit. And I can take this base color and maybe give it like a lighter brown, something like this. I'm going to take my tree and I want to scatter some of these around. I'm going to use geometry nodes just to make a little simple tree randomizer that we can like scatter around this surface. So instead of actually putting geometry nodes on this surface of this thing, I'm going to create a new object just for this. So I'm going to create a plane. I'll just grab it up here so we can see it. And I'll move my tree up here as well. And with this guy, I'm just going to go here to the wrench icon, add modifier, and I'm going to navigate down to geometry nodes and pop that on. And I'll bring up my view a little bit and switch this to the geometry node editor. Take this here, and then what we'll do is we'll click new to create a new geometry node system. And I'll call this tree scatter. This is going to be a very simple system. So all I want to do is take an object. First, actually, we'll distribute points on faces. I'll stick this here. It'll distribute a bunch of random points. I'll switch this to Poisson disk, and that gives me a distance, minimum and maximum, so I can make sure that they don't intersect too much. So I'll just set this to something so they're scattered a bit. And then I want to come over here, and we want to instance on points. And I will drop that here. And now we need to select what we're going to use for the instance, which is going to be the tree. So now I can grab an object, info node, and in the dropdown, we can select the tree, and we can take the geometry, and we can plug it into the instance. There we go. Cool. Now you can see the scale's really funny, and that's because the scale of this has been changed a lot, and we haven't applied it yet. So it's not using this scale. It's just kind of going back to 1, 1, and 1. So if I was to change all this to 1, you'd see it looks just like that. So what we can do is hit F3 and apply scale, and that's going to make these trees look correct. So cool. Now I've got this nice little thing. Now what we can do is we can randomize their size a little bit. So we can come over here and we can grab a random value node. So we're going to change the random value node to a vector. And this will give us a set of 3 numbers for a minimum and a maximum. And I want to kind of decide how big or how small I want these trees to be. So if I click and drag, it'll select all those numbers and it'll keep them the same. So I'm going to bring this up to like, I don't know, 0.3, let's say, and we'll keep the max at 1. That's fine. And I'll take the value and I'll plug it into the scale. That'll give us different size, heights and widths and sort of, fatness on these guys. And it looks really good. And now I could take my plane and let's go into edit mode and hit S to scale. This will expand it out. And you see the further out it goes, the more trees we're going to get. If you scale it here, it's going to scale the whole thing. So that's why I went into edit mode. So we need to change our Poisson disk. So the distance minimum, I'm going to turn this up until we start getting gaps between the trees and they start looking more correct. So yeah, I think that'll be pretty good. I do want to add some random rotation as well. So I might take this, just another random value node, and I will plug this into the rotation, but I don't want to rotate. I only want to rotate on the Z because I just want to spin them around. I don't want them like pointing off in weird directions. So I'll keep the X and the Y at 0 for both the max and the minimum. And I'll just take the third one will just be, I'll keep it at 0.3 and 1. I'll plug this into the rotation. And that'll just randomly rotate these guys a little bit. Now I'm going to bring this guy down and just place it in my scene. So I'll put one here like this. I'll Shift E to duplicate and maybe, let's see, go into edit mode, scale this down a bit. And grab Z and I'm just going to place these around using my grab tool. Now I've got some hanging off the side here, so I'm going to switch to vertex mode in edit mode. And I'm going to grab by hitting Shift Z, and that will turn off Z motion up and down. That allows me just to slide it around. And now I can just position these a little bit better so they fit the space. Very cool. Now maybe we'll put a little bit of a lake here. So let's go here, grab a cube. I'll scale up the cube, grab X, grab Y, scale this up, grab X, grab Y, scale Z, just getting it to a nice position. And I'll go into edit mode and select this bottom face and grab this bottom face and just bring it up so it's inside. And then over here, I'll grab materials and I'll create a new material, call this water, and I'll give it a nice blue color. Awesome. Now this tree up here, I don't need this floating around in my scene, so I could either like place it, within the scene, or I can just create a new collection, just like this, place it in it, and then just turn that collection off. It'll still source fine and get drawn for the geometry nodes system. All right, great. Now let's get to some lighting and texturing and stuff, make this look nice. So I'm gonna grab my camera and I'll jump into it. And I'm going to switch maybe to a 24mm lens. And I will come over here and lock my camera to view and just get us a nice angle that we can look at. And then we'll talk about perspective and orthographic views. I'm gonna delete the default light and I'm going to switch over to rendered mode. I'll come over to my render settings and I'll take Eevee, I'll turn on ambient occlusion, bloom, and screen space reflections. And I'm gonna go Shift A, light, sunlight. And I will put a sunlight in my scene and just kind of rotate this around and turn my strength up on that. Maybe give it a little bit of a blue tint. And then I'm gonna take that sun and Shift D and rotate Z, bring it around the other way, and maybe on the X a touch as well. Maybe give this a bit of a warm color. Turn it down some. I'm just going to scale Z on these guys just to elongate them a little bit more. And what we can do as well is we can just come up here to the render tab and I can turn off scene world. And this will allow me to bring in one of the default shaders. So I can turn on the world opacity, bring it up, turn the strength up a bit. This will create a nice HDRI for my scene. Now this won't render with this, so you have to still find an HDRI and bring one in. So I recommend going to hdrihaven.com or polyhaven.com, finding one you like there and downloading it. But this is perfectly fine as well, just to play with. And we can rotate it around and find a nice angle. I'm also going to take my camera and go down to my camera tab, go to viewport display, and I'm going to turn on passport 2, which is right here. I'll turn that right up so that way I can just focus on my image. Okay, so I've just scaled everything up a little bit to stretch these trees out and just played around with their placement. I also took the base of my main hero tree here and I went into edit mode and I extended out the trunk. That way I never have situations where I run out of trunk, if they're floating in the air or something because I've moved it around. Just give me a bit more flexibility. All right, so now that I've got all this set up, let's talk about perspective and orthographic, and let's make 2 nice shots out of these. So first off, perspective. A perspective camera is a camera that has depth to it. So as things get further away from the camera, they get smaller. So you see the grid lines here on my floor, you can see as they get further and further away, they're converging, right? So as things get further away, they get smaller, they get more distant. There's a real sense of depth in the scene. You could really enhance perspective by turning up or turning down the focal length of your camera. So this is a 24 millimeter at the moment. If I switch this down to like a 14, we're going to get what's called a really wide angle lens. The further down you go, the wider this is going to get. And it's basically more and more pronounced in terms of like the depth of your scene. It just makes it greater and greater. So what we can do is we can create really neat shots. Like if we put the camera in this forest, maybe over here with this section, you can see with a 9 millimeter lens, it makes this forest look really big and it's like looming above us. We turn on the depth of field and bring down the f-stop of our camera as well. You're going to start seeing a lot of cool stuff going on. If I bring my focus forward a bit. There we go. So the further back the trees are, the more out of focus they are. So we get a really big sense of scale. Like this trees, the forest is really big and we're really tiny within it. So if you want to create scenes where you have like the viewer feels like they're inside of a world or inside of something, you want to go for small focal lengths and a camera that kind of sits inside the space. Now let's look at the opposite. So if I Shift D and duplicate and then jump into this other camera, so now I'm looking at a new camera view. Let's take that focal length and let's start turning it up. So let's go all the way up to like say 50, and I'll turn depth of field off for now so we can have a look at it. You can see with a 50 millimeter, we've actually lost a lot of that depth. Everything feels a lot more scrunched together. It feels a lot flatter. And basically the higher your focal length is, the less depth there is in your shot. So if we took this all the way up to a 200 millimeter, for example, we have to bring our camera really far back. In fact, we're going to start messing with our clip start and ends. If you ever have things disappear, it's usually the end clip is too small. So you need to increase it to like 1,000 or something. And now you can go further back. But you can see, like looking in the distance even, look at the grid lines. You can see that they are still converging. They're getting smaller in the distance, but it's not as pronounced. And everything has a lot more of what's called an orthographic view. Now, orthographic cameras, you can change the type right here from perspective to orthographic. If we switch to orthographic, now there is no focal length anymore. We've actually just disabled it. So it doesn't matter where the camera is. It's always going to be at the same sort of same level of depth. Now, when you have an orthographic camera, you can't zoom in and out with your camera anymore because your camera doesn't have any like third dimension. It just moves in this sort of orbital sort of pattern, I guess you could say. So you can't zoom in and out when you have an orthographic camera. You have to use the orthographic scale, which is this value right here. And the larger this is, the smaller your world is. One of the downsides of this is if I turn up depth of field and try and focus in my scene, you can see it doesn't matter what my f-stop is. It's sort of either all in focus or it's not in focus at all. So if we switch back to perspective and just go for a really high millimeter lens, like a 200 or like a 300 even, we can zoom back. And now what I can do is I'll get my focus distance. I'll pick something in the scene. I'll pick the lake here. I'll change my f-stop to something really small, like 0.01. But now I can get a very similar feel. I can get that orthographic feel, right? Because I've got this really long lens, but my camera still can move in and out of the scene. And so it can still have some depth of field that it can play with. So this is really great for creating a very cool miniature feel. So you can see now everything feels miniature, whereas before we jump in this camera, it doesn't feel miniature. It feels big. It feels like it's all around us. So this is how you can kind of create the variation in those styles. The miniature feel really comes from having this shallow depth of field and a really cool little angle. So I'm just going to set up a nice little shot here and do auto render. Okay, so I've just assigned my ground material to a few other faces just to kind of create some more variation, and I've scaled up my water a bit. I thought I'd make it a nice little island. It looks kind of cool, and Anyways, I want to take the base here. I was playing around too. I think this looks nice if we scale this up. So I'm going to hit S and Shift Z to lock it on the X and Y scale. So I'll just scale this up. Makes this nice little sort of table. There we go. Lovely little diorama. I'm really happy with this. I think this looks really cool. I hope this was a really helpful explanation for you about the difference between perspective and orthographic cameras, and also how to use lens size to create different feels. I hope that you're able to take this in your own projects and do some really exciting stuff. Please let us know what you thought of this tutorial, and any tutorials you'd like to see in the future, just leave a comment down below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, and please check out cgcookie.com. We've got a ton of amazing stuff there for you. Thanks again for watching. I'll catch you in the next tutorial. Until then, see you later.